Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth Preston,
And I'm Sarah Adams,
and you're listening to
the Writing Docs podcast,
where we discuss how businesses can help their teams to become better and more confident writers. If your team needs help achieving positive writing outcomes, then contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywrite.com.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah Adams, and I'm an executive consultant at Hurley Write. And you're listening to the Writing Docs podcast, where we talk about how businesses can help their team members become better and more confident writers. I'm here with my co host, Elizabeth Preston. Elizabeth, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
And we are also very excited to welcome Jeff Perry to our podcast today. Jeff, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah and Elizabeth. This is so exciting, and just talking right before we start recording got me even more excited. So
yes, we did nerd out on Jeff earlier about his multifaceted background. Jeff has been a software, mechanical, and manufacturing engineer. He received his Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Brigham Young University and his MBA from the University of Washington. He now provides coaching and training to engineers and technology professionals, and he provides consulting to engineering and technology firms to help them create a culture of innovation, production, and positivity, especially with regard to human connection. Jeff also co-hosts the Engineering Career Coach podcast, which has over 2.3 million downloads, and he has his own book titled The Intentional Engineer, a guide to a purpose-driven life and career for engineers and technical professionals, which came out just this fall and is getting rave reviews.
Jeff, Elizabeth and I both read your book in preparation for today. And as we said earlier, we were completely fangirling over you and the content. I really liked how one of the main principles that you talk about is that you teach engineers and technology professionals about being intentional. And I love that word. It's a key principle in your book, and it's based on what you said in your book. It sounds like something you live your life by. Tell our listeners what exactly it means to be intentional.
well, and the cool thing is, and as both of you are recognizing, that while I wrote this book to engineers, I hope that no matter whether people are engineers or not, these principles can be applied to everyone. And so the principle of being intentional is that being intentional is a choice. It's an opportunity to decide who you want to be, essentially. It's like what I like to, who you want to become, to take stock of where you're at now. And instead of being reactive or just opportunistic and letting your life and your career happen to you, you have the opportunity to decide, this is who I want to become. These are the opportunities I want to seek. These are the things I want to learn. These are the ways I want to grow. And now I can, with that lens, I can decide what actions am I going to take, what things I'm going to try, what ways am I going to invest in myself to make that a reality. And to do that, again, with intention, so that we can kind of unleash our potential and continue to grow, instead of just hoping that the right things are going to come along and be thrown right in front of us in our path.
You mentioned in your book that we're all at different levels of what you just described, different places in this journey of being more intentional. Talk to us about some of the different places that you see folks kind of starting off this journey from.
Yeah, so I take that idea of being intentional from the lens of like where people are at in their careers, but also recognize that we're trying to look at our entire lives, and we're not just wanting to apply intentionality to our careers, but who we want to be as a husband or wife or spouse or partner, as a father or mother or a community member or any other area of your life that's important to you, right? But particularly applied to the type of people we're trying to become in our careers. So I created a model that's kind of like a ladder, but it's a different kind of ladder than we think of like climbing the corporate ladder. It's a ladder of us becoming more intentional. That first layer down at the bottom is where people are unemployed. They're feeling overlooked right now, right? So I would love to be employed, but I'm feeling overlooked. I'm not really growing in that aspect of my life. But then level 2 is where people are in kind of a space. Let me get the right word here because it's escaping my brain. There we are. They're kind of in an obligatory professional situation. So I'm doing what I need to survive. I'm certainly not thriving and really doing what I want to do. Probably not making a whole lot of money, but making ends meet and doing what they need to do. And by the way, if people ever find themselves in this space, it's a very noble place to be. You're doing what you need to do to take care of things, whether that's taking care of your family or your own health. But we can look, but that doesn't mean that you can't look for what's next, right? But if you're there right now, it's okay. Like you got to start where you are, right? Or if you're unemployed, same thing. Like you don't need to feel shameful about that. It's just saying, what do I need to do differently, and how can I be intentional about what's next? Where I see a whole lot of people, especially in the engineering profession, which is a lot of people that I work with, is in this kind of level 3, which is kind of in this opportunistic state. Engineers are very employable, have a lot of opportunities and a lot of options they can take in their careers in a lot of situations. But at some point, a lot of people find themselves, hey, I'm getting paid well, but maybe they're feeling disengaged with their work. They're not really feeling aligned and their work and the other areas of their life beyond just their work. And so they're now looking for what's next. How do I really rectify this? Is this about the workplace? Is this about the role that I'm in? Is this something else, right? And so the tipping point is this opportunity for us to be intentional, because these people are a lot of just opportunists and saying, hey, these things came my way. I took it, looked like it was good money. And, I can just sort of do that. But now I get to take that choice to be intentional about where I want to go. And that's more purpose-driven growth about who we want to become, the things we want to learn, and the kind of impact we have. And that can lead us then to the top area, which is thinking about being higher impactful, more about impact outside of ourselves, right? And instead of just looking for my own satisfaction, my own work, and kind of dialing into maybe we can find out what our life's work is and our life's purpose and the ways that we can do that. So there's a lot of different kind of a way to progress, but that tipping point and that theme of intentionality can help us progress at any point through that. But it's a real tipping point from being opportunistic to really being intentional about who we want to become.
It's interesting that you mention the growth, that you have to have intention and live with intention in order to grow, because in your book you say this can be uncomfortable. It can feel uncomfortable to intentionally grow either in your personal lives or your career, or as we see at Hurley Write, in your writing at work.
Mm.
People feel uncomfortable with change in any aspect of their life, including writing. They like to go, I've done this for 20 years. This is how we've done it. Let's stick to it, when there could be a better way. So, talking about writing, what does it mean to be intentional in the writing that engineers and technical writers create?
Yeah, so writing is something that sometimes engineers have a stereotype around, that like, hey, we're not good writers and whatnot. Like I've had my own struggles with that. But when it comes to being intentional, is this choice of like, what is the writing's purpose, right? So what do you want to communicate? Is the purpose of whatever you're writing, whether this is writing a instant message note to someone in your organization? Are you writing an email to describe something? Are you creating a formal document that you're sending to a client or to someone internally, or you're defining an SOP, a standard work process or something like that, right? So what is the purpose of this? What are you trying to communicate? Are you trying to persuade, to share an idea, to help people be informed, to share information, to teach something to someone who doesn't know something right now, right? And so what's the purpose behind that? And then trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person to understand what's their perspective, seek to understand the reader of whatever you're writing so that you can think about what perspective do I need to bring? Where are they coming from? How do I need to lead them along with the things that I share with them? And what might be good to share beyond just writing words, but if there are visuals or other things you want to share to communicate things as well, all in the sense so that you can write in a way to accomplish your goal in a way that's relevant to the people who are going to be consuming or reading your writing. Because if you create something but it's not actually going to accomplish its goal, what's the point of doing that in the first place? Or it could just be misconstrued or miscommunicated, and that can cause its own problems.
One of the things that I found so interesting in your book was that you actually suggest that engineers and technology professionals keep a journal. You recommend that they write outside of work. And as you just said, a lot of times engineers have this mindset of, oh, I'm not a good writer. I don't want to write, or I don't need to write, whatever their mindset might be. You kind of insinuate that maybe there's a dislike for writing there. Why? Why do you suggest writing anyway?
Yeah, so journaling is interesting. It's certainly a less formal form of writing than we would think about in a business context in most cases, right? I mostly promote the practice of journaling from the standpoint of it's a really good growth practice for introspection and reflection and for awareness, right? But from a writing standpoint, just practicing that action of writing anything can be helpful. So and so and writing in a journal or anything, whether you're typing, I prefer journaling to do it analog and write with my hand is my personal preference. But writing like that, it slows down your thinking because we can think faster than we can write. And I think that's a good thing because engineers and a lot of us can have our minds going a million miles an hour. So it purposefully slows us down to be concise with the words that we need to get out of our heads and can help us put some structure to that in a way that can be helpful. And so you can journal in a way that you free write to just, hey, stream of consciousness, what's coming to mind. That's cool. That's a fun way to do it, and I like doing that from time to time. I also like to have some structure around some of the questions that I ask myself on a daily basis that I want to reflect on, and I can adjust those from time to time based on the things that I'm working on to be more intentional about the growth that I'm trying to work on at any given time. Right. So any of these things to be, but the whole practice is designed around what are you trying to work on? Writing in general is a good practice to do, but then thinking about what are you writing and can that promote you towards improving in the areas of your life that you're trying to work on.
So let me ask you this. Writing or doing anything on a daily basis is a habit that you have to build. And sometimes habits are hard to build. How do you suggest we start with getting into that habit of journaling every day? Not just for the engineers and technical professionals that you work with, but for all of us, because it's a great tool, right? Journaling is amazing, but how do we get ourselves in the groove of getting going?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not an expert on habit building. There are some great books out there, Atomic Habits, and a bunch of others out there. But one of the principles of building habits is the idea of habit stacking, right? So take something that is already a habit in your life and add this new thing that you want to as part of that. So if you already have a morning routine or an evening routine, if you're trying to add journaling to that, hey, I brush my teeth in the morning or in the evening, and the next thing I do is going to be write in my journal. Or I set my alarm and then I journal, or whatever that is, right? So adding there are a number of things that we've already established as habits as part of our daily routines. Can you pair this new habit or any new habit that you're trying to do with that to make it this thing that you're already doing is the trigger to add on this new thing, and not to think that this new habit, if you're trying to do that of journaling, needs to take a bunch of time. Less than 5 minutes, even just 2 or 3 minutes, can be really impactful if you just spend some time doing that and kind of create your day, or reflect on your day, whether it's morning or evening, so that you can uh, start putting in that habit and that practice.
I love that. That's such great advice. A couple of minutes ago, I asked you about building habits, and I want to kind of circle back around to that because managers and businesses need to cultivate a new mindset and that sort of thing when it comes to writing. So, how would you suggest that they go about that? How can they encourage a better mindset and help their staff build those habits of being more intentional in life and in their writing?
Yeah, so the hope would be to instill in people, first of all, the belief that this is possible. So belief and mindsets could sometimes be used synonymously, right? So, th- but belief maybe sometimes goes a little bit further in kind of getting to the identity that we have as people. So I like going back to myself and my own story with writing. I saw myself, and I would actively say that I am not a creative person. I would say I am not a good writer. And those were pieces of my identity that I took on, right? Now, if that's what I believe of myself, what do you think is how do you think that identity, those beliefs, those mindsets are going to fuel my actions in terms of, any work that I put into writing? Well, it certainly wasn't going to be helpful in that case, right? And so, from a managerial perspective, we have this opportunity, and we're talking about applying this to writing, but you can apply this to all sorts of other things to perhaps help the people that you're leading see that you believe in them and their potential and their ability before they might believe in themselves, right? And start to shift in their mindsets. If they can embrace that someone else believes in me, then maybe I can borrow that belief for a second as I'm working on believing in myself and changing my own mindset and belief about this, right? And what a beautiful thing you can do in a managerial context. And we can certainly find other people in our lives if we're struggling, good friends and family members and partners and spouses who can do that for us as well. Because it's interesting. I work on this with so many people. It's a lot easier to believe in someone else sometimes than it is to believe in you. And so if we can find those people who can be that for us as we are trying to embrace these newer, more empowering beliefs in ourselves, and it creates this collective thing together as a team. So then a manager or a leader can establish that belief then as a team. Then that whole mindset of the collective team and supporting each other through this instead of like, oh, this is a slog. Yeah, I hate writing too. Yeah, we all suck at it, but we have to do it anyway. Like, we can shift that whole frame around the experience and the opportunity there that we have so that everyone can grow together.
And
I love that because managers actually have power there to instill in their teams. I believe you have a growth mindset, or you can have that. I'm going to view you with a growth mindset until you believe it yourself, and that what you do matters, what you communicate matters. And is there, I've seen the engineers create in your book, you say what we do matters, Jeff. Does what we write matter in engineering? And is there kind of a duty with engineers to be clear communicators?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything we do in our working careers matters. Stakeholders for our work are everywhere, and I talk about it specifically with engineers, like and technology professionals who are thinking about in their context, like, hey, they're building, vehicles, infrastructure, technologies that we use on a daily basis, and so like what we do impacts people in their daily lives. And there's some terrible things that can happen if engineering stuff goes wrong, and that can be a problem, from physical harm that can be done if infrastructure collapse, bridges collapse, or an airplane goes down or something like that. Like, that's a big deal. But also like the technology that gets created, and there's a lot of conversations around mental health and how do we create technology that really helps people lift humanity instead of degrades in some ways. And so there's some of the things around there. But the communication around what happens, because some of the terrible things that have happened with infrastructure challenges or other engineering fails were around miscommunication, right? Whether that's a technical, like a unit of measurement didn't get communicated clearly, or someone missed the ball, or maybe something was communicated, but communication is not just what you're sharing, but are you receiving that? Do you have the right processes to receive the communication and listen well? And so there's a lot that goes into communication in general, but yes, we have a duty to deliver the best thing that we can, and in all situations, and communicating that is a huge part of that.
And communication and miscommunication can be a game changer in no matter what you do. What are some keys to effective communication for engineers specifically? What do you suggest?
I didn't talk about this in the book, but there's a model I love to use that it kind of compares communication to a river. Like, communication is flowing all the time, theoretically, when it's going well. And there are two banks of the river that, if we get off out of the river, then we get out of the flow of communication. And the banks are um, either, and we need to kind of balance between these two. It's the way that we share information, and so that's in our writing and our speaking and all the ways that we share information, and the way that we receive or listen, right? And the flow of the river, kind of the water source of the river, is kind of the purpose of the communication and why. So number of people might struggle more on one side or the other. I like to hear myself talk a lot, and so I can struggle on the listening side, right? So where I can talk over people from time to time, and in fact, I had some pretty sharp feedback about that a number of years ago that said, "Hey, Jeff doesn't listen very well." I need to take that as a whole other story for another day, but gaining some awareness that I haven't been a great listener at times in the past. So I need to work on that listening, because if I'm only talking, I'm out of the communication flow, because the communication stops with me. I'm not receiving it, right? So we need to stay between those two and be able to share information and receive it, to keep the communication flowing for everyone, right? And so engineers who, they may tend towards one or the other. If they're pretty good listeners but they're shy about sharing, they can work on that side to be able to confidently share information in effective ways, because otherwise they're limiting the impact that they can have with the information, the insights that they have, right? So we need to work on both of those things to have effective communication.
I love that. Thinking of communication as a river. I'm going to remember that one for sure. Thank you for sharing that with us. Another thing you share with us in your book is the platinum rule. Talk to us about the platinum rule. What is that, and how can that be applied to folks who write in the business world?
Yeah, so let's just compare, first of all, what the platinum rule is. Most people are familiar with the golden rule: treat others the way that you want to be treated. The platinum rule takes it just another step further and says treat others the way that they want to be treated, right? Which means that we need to understand how others want to be treated, right? And so if we're talking about the things that we're communicating or writing, we need to understand the way that they want to be communicated to, because some people are going to want to receive communication in different ways, and the way that they might want to be listened to, right? And that determines the kind of feedback that we give. Or some people prefer more visuals and more detail or less detail, right? And also context changes, right? Because in a business context, if I'm communicating to a senior leader, that's going to be very different than if I'm communicating to like an engineering peer, and the level of detail that I'm going to want to do. And that's not just like what they want, but it's also what is really relevant for them in that context, right? So if we can put ourselves in their shoes, and understand what they're looking for, and be open to that feedback as we continue to get better, right? Because it's not just a one-time thing. We need to continue to communicate about how we communicate. Then then we can keep iterating and getting better as we kind of embrace that growth mindset, and how can we get better together as we move forward.
It's a
Wow.
very empathetic principle where you're thinking more about your audience rather than about yourself and what you want.
Totally. Yeah. And isn't that a big deal, right? Because if there's a way that I want to receive or be communicated to that's going to be different than you, right? And that's fine because, and so it's embracing that individuality and the diversity of how we all are. Now, can we individualize every single piece of communication? No, right? Like it's not possible. But when we can, individualize that for an individual or for a group, right? As much as possible, then our writing, our communication just has that much more opportunity to deliver the impact that we're trying to deliver.
I'm going to ask for your help on an aspect of empathy, Jeff, because I've always wondered
Uh
about this. With engineers, a lot of times we encounter them and their company, or we will tell them, hey, you need to kind of sell something, either your work or your company. We just had a client where the head of it said, I want them to sell this. I want them to sell it to the client that we're the best, they should hire us. But a lot of times when we tell engineers, you've got to sell this, I see people cringing. So, can you help me to understand that mindset? Why do so many engineers bristle when they hear that they should persuade their reader to do something or believe something with their writing?
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and sales often has a negative connotation. We often sort of jump to the terrible stereotype of like the used car salesman and poor used car salesman. I'm sure there are plenty of really nice ones, but they just get a really bad rap, right? So sorry to all of them, but selling is about so much more than just like trying to create a transaction, but helping people understand, right? So, kind of going back to the empathy, if you can understand where they're coming from, then you can understand how we need to lead them along to whether our point of view or just being able to see that. But if you can understand them in an essence where you can almost argue their point, not just yours, well, that puts you in a powerful state of understanding. But and then if they can see that you see them and understand them, then they're much more likely to listen to your point of view as well. And again, we go back to: do you have great ideas that you want to communicate? Technically, whether that's a solution to a problem that's going on at work, or that you can deliver for a client, or do you have a particular process as a business that makes you unique, or a patented approach, or unique abilities that you and your team have that others don't? That's great. And if you really believe that, that's fantastic. But if you don't have a way to communicate that to other people, that's selling, that helping them understand what you bring to the table, helping them see the value. But again, for any sales, we need to kind of be our first customer, right? We need to believe that we have something of value to share with other people, that it can be helpful. So we need to be empathetic. And that sort of shifts the conversation, because it's not just what I want to get out of someone in selling my idea, but in truly believing that what I have and what I want to help them understand, it can be helpful to them.
Mm.
So it's not just about me. I need to really believe that I can be helpful to other people, and that starts to make it feel less selfish and more altruistic, if you will, for the people who might start to cringe about the idea of sales.
Mm.
I don't think that lesson that you just gave us is really taught in the colleges. We have a running joke here that every bad writing habit is because of college. And I think maybe engineer graduates come out believing that I've got to be objective, I've got to not have any sort of persuasion whatsoever. And we have noticed some clients saying, I've got these new graduates, they can't write, I don't understand. And Jeff, you've worked with new engineers, you've worked with engineers who have been in the industry for decades. How can managers address this gap in writing and communication when they get new engineers into their firm?
Could be a number of different things, but I think finding ways to have a consistent feedback loop. So we've already talked about sort of the mindset and the belief of the growth mindset. Like, I believe in you. We can work on this. Failure is not a failure. Like if there's negative or constructive feedback, that's not a knock on you. It's more of a look at the opportunity of how we can progress and get better together, right? So kind of establishing that up front and then establishing that feedback mechanism, whether them as the manager or the leader or the team and or peer reviews or all sorts of other things that people can establish to say, hey, how can we grow together? We have feedback. If there's something that needs to be improved, that's great. We want to celebrate those things as opportunities to learn and grow, not as a shameful thing like, oh, I didn't do that right the first time. Dang it. Like there must be something wrong with me. Right. So I think it's just, and then iterating through. And so then, and maybe finding some ways to measure the progress and, hey, look at what you wrote today and let's just look back to 6 months ago and where you came from. Boom, huge improvement. Yeah, there's still more improvement to be made, but if we can focus on that progress that we're making, instead of just focusing on the gap between where we are now and where we wish we were in any skill, and we're again talking about writing here, then that can help us see that progress. That's a huge motivating factor as we continue forward.
It sounds like it always comes down to clear communication. And tell me, what is your number one rule for clear communication that you sort of pass on to the folks that you work with?
Is communicate from a place that is relevant to them. Put yourself in their shoes, understand where they're coming from, what they care about, and communicate the things that are going to be most helpful in from their perspective and in their context. If you can do that, then again, it decouples this, like it's just about me and what I need to communicate, but really establishing I'm communicating in a way that I want to be helpful to other people, not just doing it to solve my issues or break down my barriers, but really seeing people as people. And that's a different mindset principle that we could get into as well. But yeah, so putting yourself in their shoes and seeking to understand them so that you can communicate the right things, which can help you be more concise and focused in your communication.
That's
It's
brilliant.
that platinum rule again.
That platinum rule. Well, speaking of questions that we all have, we have three questions that we always ask our guests. See, I'm coming up with new questions for you right on the spot to try to stump you. No, I'm just kidding. Are you ready to answer the three questions we ask of all of our guests? Jeff, what is one thing that you wish you'd been taught about writing that would have made your professional writing life easier?
It's not about the grade or getting the right answer. It's about communicating so that you can be better understood.
I love that.
That sounds like someone that got like a 4.0 GPA in college, that now it's no longer about the grade.
I put way too much emphasis on GPA early on, and I realized much later, like that didn't matter nearly as much as a whole lot of other things that I could have spent some of that effort on.
Great point. Okay, second question. A writing rule or a habit that we in society or in the business world or in colleges or whatever that we hear about a lot that doesn't seem to serve folks in their actual writing life. Like never start a sentence a certain way or
Yeah, I don't think about writing rules very much. This isn't something that I spent a whole lot of time pondering, but because I knew this was a question, the thing that came up is like, I remember early on, like that a paragraph had to be a certain length, like at least, usually it was like 5 sentences. Maybe we've shortened that to three, but also like a lot of times in our modern day writing, attention spans are a whole lot shorter, and social media doesn't help with that. And so, but even in long form writing, articles and books and things, sometimes the most effective paragraph can be a really short sentence, right? So a paragraph doesn't need to be a long multi-sentence thing. But we can use the structure of our writing to create impact and focus, and maybe convey a point powerfully instead of feeling like we need to have a paragraph that's a certain length.
I laugh because I gave my students a 3 to 5 sentence minimum paragraph length requirement just yesterday. So I cringe
I'm
because
a
I
rule
did that.
breaker.
I know. I,
You're a rebel,
I
Jeff.
appreciate the rebel. I appreciate the rule breaker, but don't tell my students that. Okay. What is one thing that you wish people knew about writing, specifically in the business world?
Yeah, and so I'll just apply this to my world of engineering and technology professionals. We talked about this a little bit with like some of the stereotypes that maybe engineers accept on themselves and people put on engineers around not being great communicators. I want people to understand that engineers can be excellent writers and communicators if they choose to be, right? We don't need to dig into those stereotypes. If like we can laugh and make jokes about it, but if they're unhelpful, let's not proliferate it. Sometimes that can proliferate some of that fixed mindset of me thinking that engineers are a certain way, or I'm an engineer, I'm going to take on that fixed identity of what I think an engineer should be. But communication, writing is like any other skill that it can be grown if we choose to, and but that's an intentional choice we need to make.
I love it. Love it.
Jeff, I think that's going to apply to our next section that we always have, which is called Doctor's Diagnosis, where our listeners and clients submit their writing ailments and we write a prescription for them to fix their writing ailments. So here, our listener's writing ailment comes from an engineer who has about 6 years under their belt of working in the real world. So they say, I want to be a good writer. I do. But I'm not a writer. I'm not hardwired that way. I've never been creative, and I hate that writing is so subjective. But my project manager says that I need to get better at writing and that writing is part of the job. What next steps should I take to somehow make my manager happy and help me not to be miserable while writing at work? What do you think, Jeff?
Okay, so I'm going to give a pretty quick hit prescription here on this one. Okay, so this comes from a book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Acor, who's a positive psychologist at Harvard and written a number of books now. But the prescription is to take out a sticky pad, a sticky note, and just take 60 seconds before you've blocked out time to write whatever it is you're going to write. You need to write a document or whatever that is. Take 60 seconds, and you can set a timer if you need to, and just write bullet points on the sticky note. All of the positive things and opportunities that could come because of your writing. The whole purpose of this is to positively frame the experience of the writing instead of digging into all these things that you said, like, I'm not a writer, I'm not hardwired that way, I've never been creative, all these negative things. Let's look at what are all the positive things that could come out of this writing. For example, I'm going to be able to help my team member with this to understand something new. I'm going to be able to grow this skill of writing by practicing. That's good. I'm going to help my manager understand where we're coming from. I'm going to be able to communicate a technical solution. In doing so, this is going to be able to help our clients with something. Anything positive that you can see potentially coming out of writing and whatever it is you're writing, positively frame it that way. And that can start to change our psychology about the experience that we're about to jump into instead of kind of digging into that negative energy that we have. So 60 seconds, a quick priming activity is what we'd call it, that can help us frame the whole rest of the experiences we dig into this writing experience that we get into.
That's a very concrete
I
prescription.
was taking notes.
Jeff, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about your work or reach out to you to see if they could use some of your coaching?
Yeah, great. So you can find me at jeff-perry.com or interested in the book, theintentionalengineer.com. And that'll route you where it can be found on Amazon. The book, as well as created a corresponding workbook that you can use to kind of go deeper. There's the book is very action oriented, but I find when I write books or read books, rather, I can sometimes just get focused on reading and getting through rather than spending time on the application. That's what the workbook is for, is to give you that space to apply. You can get a free digital workbook, or you can buy the printed one on Amazon if you like to put pen to paper. And then I'm really active on LinkedIn. So people want to find me on LinkedIn, they can find me there. Should be pretty easy to find there. So those are the places: jeff-perry.com, theintentionalengineer.com, or find me on LinkedIn.
We've been talking today with Jeff Perry, and it's been a pleasure having you today, Jeff. You've given us a lot to think about. I've learned a lot. I was taking some notes here, and I've got a lot to reflect on. Thanks so much for being here. And to all of you, our listeners, make sure you check out Jeff Perry's latest book, The Intentional Engineer, A Guide to a Purpose-Driven Life and Career for Engineers and Technical Professionals. It really will change your mindset and your writing for the better. And as we said, Elizabeth and I have read it. It's excellent. And so we are thrilled to share it with all of you. So this is Hurley Writes, the Writing Docs, signing off. May your week be filled with good health and good writing. Have a good one, everybody.
Hurley Write can help your employees learn better strategies to be effective and efficient writers. Hurley Write has helped numerous companies solve their writing issues, and we can help your team too. Contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywrite.com, and one of our writing experts will be in touch.